The second highest ranking official in Iran is its president, Masoud Pezeshkian. He has promised retribution for the attacks which killed the country's supreme leader. He also said that a leadership council had begun its work to choose a new ruler. The 88-seat Assembly of Experts, a group of mostly hard-line clerics, will choose Khamenei's replacement.
And Mujtaba Khamenei, son of the late Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has reportedly been chosen by Iran's Assembly of Experts as the new Supreme Leader amid IRGC influence. However, some reports citing Iranian officials claim that the senior clerics responsible for naming the next Supreme Leader convened on Tuesday, with Mujtaba Khamenei emerging as the top contender. A final decision was not made, while some clerics considered announcing him as successor as soon as Wednesday.
The Islamic Republic has activated something it has only used once in its entire 47-year history: the constitutional machinery of succession. But here's the twist. The last time Iran chose a supreme leader, the country had months to debate it. This time, they're trying to do it in 48 hours, while under active airstrikes, while their military leadership has been decapitated, while their rivals are watching closely, waiting for the system to crack. If that sounds unstable, that's because it is. Right now, inside Tehran, an 88-member clerical assembly known as the Assembly of Experts is preparing to choose the next supreme leader. But the conditions could not be more chaotic. Think about it. American and Israeli strikes are still ongoing. Some members of that assembly may not even be able to safely travel to Tehran. And the military power structure of the country, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, just lost its commander in the very same attack that killed Khamenei. So yes, this is not a routine political transition. This is a power struggle unfolding in real time. And everyone inside the system is now asking one question: who actually controls Iran next? Because depending on that answer, the Islamic Republic could stabilize, or it could begin to unravel. Now here's something even more fascinating. The Iranian leadership actually anticipated this exact scenario. According to reporting confirmed by the New York Times, Khamenei had quietly prepared for the possibility that he might be killed in a decapitation strike. So, he left behind something like a contingency plan, a playbook for what happens if the top leadership disappears overnight. That plan reportedly included instructions for senior officials to immediately activate a provisional leadership council. And that's exactly what happened. Within hours of the strike being confirmed, power moved to a temporary 3-person leadership structure. Now, under Iran's constitution, when a supreme leader dies, 3 people temporarily run the country: the president, the head of the judiciary, and a cleric selected from the Guardian Council. Right now, those 3 people are President Masoud Pezeshkian, considered a reformist; Judiciary Chief Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, a hardline figure; and Guardian Council cleric Ayatollah Alireza Arafi. Now pause for a moment and think about that combination. A reformist president, paired with a deeply conservative judiciary chief who has spent years blocking moderates from running for office. And then a cleric closely tied to the old power structure. That is the temporary government running Iran during wartime. If that sounds like a recipe for internal friction, well, you're not wrong. Every major decision they make now requires agreement between people who often disagree on almost everything. And meanwhile, the IRGC, Iran's powerful military organization, continues operating through its own command structure, which leads to one of the most revealing moments in this entire crisis. Because within hours of Khamenei's death being confirmed, the IRGC launched fresh missile attacks against US bases across West Asia. 27 installations were reportedly targeted. Now notice something important here. Those strikes happened before a new supreme leader was chosen, before the Assembly of Experts had even convened, before the Provisional Council had established full authority, which raises a rather uncomfortable question. Who exactly authorized those strikes? If the answer is no one, then the IRGC has effectively demonstrated that it can conduct major military operations without waiting for civilian leadership. And if that's true, it changes the balance of power inside Iran dramatically, because the man who becomes supreme leader may technically sit at the top of the system, but real power could already be shifting elsewhere, toward the military. Now let's talk about the succession itself. Because Khamenei didn't leave the field completely open. According to multiple reports, he secretly identified 3 clerics he believed could succeed him. The names reportedly included Mohseni Ejei, the judiciary chief, Asghar Hijazi, one of Khamenei's closest longtime aides, and Hassan Khomeini, the grandson of the founder of the Islamic Republic. Now that list is fascinating for what it tells us. One candidate represents the institutional hardliners, one represents personal loyalty to Khamenei's office, and the third represents symbolic revolutionary legitimacy. But here's what none of them really control: the loyalty of the IRGC. And that brings us to perhaps the most controversial name in this entire succession drama, Mojtaba Khamenei, the late supreme leader's son. Mojtaba is 56 years old. He has never held government office. His religious credentials are, frankly, not particularly strong by traditional clerical standards, and yet he may currently be the front-runner. Why? Because of his ties to the IRGC. For years, Mojtaba built relationships with key commanders inside Iran's security establishment. And in a moment like this, when missiles are flying and the system feels under threat, the support of the military may matter more than theological prestige. Because imagine the slogan, "A republic turning into a family throne." That's political dynamite, and it could fuel unrest at exactly the moment the country is already under pressure. So, this is the dilemma now facing the Assembly of Experts. They must choose a leader, but every option carry risk. Choose Mojtaba, and the military gets its man, but the clerical system fractures. Choose a traditional cleric, and the IRGC may simply dominate the system from behind the scenes. Fail to choose anyone, and Iran could effectively become a military-run state. And remember, all of this is happening while US and Israeli forces continue military operations, which means the clock is ticking. The Iranian foreign minister said today that a new supreme leader could be chosen within 1 or 2 days. That would make it the fastest leadership transition in the country's history. But speed in moments like this usually signals something else: pressure or even panic. Because every hour Iran spends without a clear leader is another hour its rivals can exploit. And as we're about to see, the power struggle inside Tehran is only one part of this story. Outside Iran, other players are already moving, and some of them are openly discussing what comes after the Islamic Republic itself. That is where things start to get even more complicated. Inside Iran's opposition networks, the message is already circulating. They're saying this moment proves something they've argued for years, that the Islamic Republic was never really a stable system. It was a system built around one man, and now that man is gone. One of the loudest voices pushing that narrative is Reza Pahlavi, yes, the son of the last Shah of Iran. Now before you roll your eyes and say, wait, are we going back to monarchy again? That's not exactly what he's arguing for. Pahlavi has been promoting the idea of a secular democratic transition, a political system that moves Iran away from clerical rule entirely. And in recent months, he has been speaking more and more openly about what he calls the collapse window, the moment when a regime becomes vulnerable enough for transformation. In fact, the CIA recently published a public call encouraging Iranian insiders to contact them securely. That's not something intelligence agencies do lightly. When they openly encourage defections, it usually means they believe insiders might actually consider it. Think about the timing. The country just lost its supreme leader. The chain of command is unclear. Military leaders are making independent decisions, and officials across the government are suddenly asking themselves, who will be in charge tomorrow? Moments like that are exactly when loyalty begins to shift. And intelligence services know it. But here's the bigger geopolitical picture. Because while Iran's internal struggle unfolds, world powers are calculating their next move. Washington is watching closely. So is Israel. But they're not the only ones. Russia is watching. China is watching. Even regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Turkey are watching. Why? Because Iran is not just another country. It sits at the center of an enormous geopolitical network. Energy routes, military alliances, regional proxy groups, and most importantly, a nuclear program. And that nuclear question is where this story becomes extremely serious. Because for the first time in decades, there may be no single authority capable of making nuclear decisions for Iran. Iran's nuclear program was heavily damaged during a military operation in 2025. Many facilities were destroyed, but the knowledge still exists, the scientists still exist, the engineering plans still exist, and some hardened facilities, particularly around Isfahan, were reportedly protected before the latest strikes. So, the nuclear capability itself hasn't disappeared, it's just paused. And decisions about what to do next normally come from one person, the supreme leader. He has final authority over nuclear strategy, but right now, that position is empty. The Provisional Leadership Council cannot authorize nuclear escalation. They don't have that power. The Assembly of Experts cannot either. They're busy trying to choose the next leader. So who actually decides nuclear policy today? Technically, no one. And that creates what many analysts are calling the most dangerous 48-hour window in modern nuclear politics. Because if escalation happens, it might not come from political leadership. It could come from the military. And that brings us back once again to the IRGC. If you want to understand who holds real leverage in Iran right now, look at them. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is not just a military force. It's a political power structure. It controls vast economic networks, energy companies, construction industries, security organizations, and of course, missile forces. Some analysts believe the IRGC has quietly become the most powerful institution in the country, even before Khamenei died. In fact, there were reports that during the final months of his life, some commanders were withholding the full reality of the war situation from him, partly because they feared his reaction, and partly because the military leadership had already begun operating independently. If that's true, then the power shift we're seeing today didn't begin last week. It may have been developing for years. The United States has already signaled that military pressure will continue, which means the new leader of Iran, whoever that ends up being, will inherit a country that is at war, economically strained, politically divided, and internationally isolated. That's not exactly the easiest job description, and yet, someone will take that position very soon, because the Assembly of Experts cannot afford to delay. Every hour without a leader makes Iran look weaker, and weakness invites more pressure. So right now, inside a room somewhere in Tehran, 88 clerics are debating the future of their country, and possibly the survival of their entire system. But the decision they make will not only shape Iran, it could reshape the balance of power across the entire Middle East. What happens if Mojtaba Khamenei becomes supreme leader? What happens if the IRGC quietly takes control? And what happens if the Islamic Republic itself begins to fracture? Because the bombs that killed Khamenei may have done something much bigger. They may have triggered the most dangerous political transition the Middle East has seen in decades, and the world is about to find out what comes next. The strike that killed Ali Khamenei did more than eliminate a leader. It triggered the most uncertain political transition Iran has faced in decades. The coming days will reveal whether the system adapts, consolidates, or begins to change. For now, the world waits, watching Tehran, watching the Assembly of Experts, watching the IRGC, watching the streets, because the decision made in those rooms may shape not only Iran's future, but the future of the entire Middle East, and maybe even the balance of global power. What do you think happens next? Will Iran stabilize under a new supreme leader? Will the military quietly become the real power behind the system? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a much larger transformation? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this analysis helpful, support the work by liking the video. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on developments as this story continues to unfold, because the next few days may be some of the most important in Iran's modern history.